A brake can over or under adjust if the automatic adjuster cable the cable, and this causes the improper adjustment. Just make sure no cable ends are kinked when they're hooked up.
If you install a new brake adjuster overload spring, make sure that the hooks face outward. Use the new type green or blue painted spring, and be careful that you don't bend it out of shape when installing it.
Thank you, Tech. Mike, you can also get over adjustment if the drum is badly out of round or off center. You see, as the drum turns, you get back and forth shoe movement, which can work the adjuster when it's not needed. The total out of round indication of any drum should not exceed 6 thousandths. You may find a rear drum which is slightly distorted and jammed on because the bolt circle and drum pilot or mating drum holes are not concentric. First, try a new drum, but if there's flange pilot interference at one point, even after trying different bolt holes, you may also need a new axle shaft.
If a rear brake drum or axle flange has too much runout, the linings can also wear out in a hurry. Over adjustment is no problem here, but a wobbly drum can cause lining drag and wear even when the shoes are fully retracted.
Improper brake adjustment is basically a parking brake condition. The main point to understand is that linings can drag and wear if the parking brake adjustment is either too tight or too loose. To do the job right, always remember to adjust the parking brake after the service brakes. To check parking brake adjustment for being too tight, first make sure the brake operating lever is fully released. Then remove both rear brake drums so you can get at the parking brake struts. Now on both brakes, seat the shoes against the anchors if necessary. There should be a slight amount of in-play at the strut in either or both brakes when the cables are fully released. If neither strut shows in-play, the parking brake adjustment is too tight. At the other extreme, if the parking brake adjustment is too loose, a cable return spring can extend far enough to move the strut operating lever and secondary shoe rearward. The spring force causes the lining to drag and wear rapidly. When the drums are off, you'd better check the parking brake strut, lever, and cable in both brakes to make sure there's no sticking or binding that could interfere with the full release of the brake shoes.
And be sure to check both cable return springs for signs of heat damage. The spring that's been overheated may not release the cable properly. If there's any doubt, install a new cable and spring assembly.
Right, Tech. And on 11-inch brakes, it's best to replace with the improved type brake cables. They're easy to identify because the spring on the left side assembly is zinc-colored and the one on the right is blue. Always install them in pairs. If you mix new and old type cables, you can cause brake drag. Weak or damaged shoe return springs in any brake can also result in brake drag and rapid lining wear. Anytime you find return springs discolored by heat or with distorted end coils, be sure to replace them with new ones. If brake shoe return springs are heat weakened, you'll probably find that the shoe hold-down springs are also affected and should be replaced. Do not stretch hold-down springs, trying to increase their tension. The added spring load can cause extra shoe drag on the support plate and make them hang up. When you reline, or if you suspect that shoes do not return properly, be sure to check the contact areas on the brake support plate and the tabs or loops on the shoes. These areas must be free of burrs or grooves which could hang up the shoes. You can use a fine-cut file to clean up any irregularities. When you install new or relined shoes, always put a thin coat of approved lubricant on the brake support plate platforms. But don't get it on the linings or the job will bounce back into the shop. And while we're on the subject, you'll probably find the shoe contact areas dry in rear brakes if there's a repeated chirp noise when you apply the brake slightly. The chirp results from back and forth movement of the shoes, so remove them and lube the contact areas. And that brings us to lining contamination. Oil, grease, or brake fluid on the lining can make a brake grab or slip. Grabbing also causes brake pull toward the side with the contaminated lining. If it slips, the brake on the opposite side works harder and causes pulling, and it wears out sooner. In addition to careless handling, lining contamination can also result from leakage at axle shaft seals, front wheel bearing seals, or leaky wheel cylinders. The lining, of course, must be replaced when other repairs are made.
If you mix different types of front wheel bearing lube, the mixture can become runny and leak out onto the lining. So play it safe. Wash out all the old lube and don't overdo it when you repack the bearings. Be sure to install new seals when you remove the bearings for any reason.
I'll remember, Tech. Bill, how does faulty wheel cylinder operation affect lining wear?
Well, a sticky or jammed piston can hold a brake shoe out in the applied position. Of course, if the shoe does not return all the way, the lining will drag and wear rapidly. A piston which is stuck in the return position does not move its shoe outward, so you lose quite a bit of braking force at that wheel. This makes the other brakes work harder, so their lining wears faster. The good brakes may cause a pull to one side, especially when front brakes are affected.
What makes a piston stick, Bill?
Usually, you'll find that corrosion makes a piston stick or jam. The corrosion results from water or splash which gets past damaged or deteriorated wheel cylinder boots. Wherever possible, check for water or evidence of corrosion under cylinder boots when you look for causes of uneven or excessive lining wear. Hydraulic system parts can also corrode from the inside as a result of water in the brake fluid. In or out of the system, the fluid must be free of water and absolutely clean, or brake problems will develop. Strange as it may seem, brake fluid soaks up moisture like a blotter. In fact, fluid which is exposed to moist air only a short time will form vapor pockets at relatively low brake system temperatures and cause loss of pedal resistance.
Keep all brake fluid containers closed airtight when they're not in use, and use a brake bleeder tank which isolates the air from the fluid. After all, a compressed air hose can pump in plenty of water.
Thank you, Tech. Now let's switch to master cylinders for a minute. When you replace a master cylinder, check the part number to make sure you're installing the correct assembly. Some master cylinders look alike on the outside, but have different front and rear piston displacements. Any questions, Mike?
Nope, I'm keeping up okay. And I'm ready to hear about incorrect linings.
Well, the main fact to remember is that linings on our original equipment and Chrysler replacement shoes are tailored to each model's braking requirements. Different linings can change the original braking characteristics, can wear faster, and may cause heat spotting on drums. Another reason for using approved shoes is possible interference in the fit of shoes obtained from an outside source. You see, there's enough similarity in the appearance of our shoes and those used on competitive make cars that there could be a mix-up. Now, as for improper installation, we're mostly concerned with someone not following the procedure described in the service manuals. For example, installing relined shoes without checking the lining radius in the drum. And as I mentioned earlier, be sure to replace heat-damaged or distorted springs with new ones. You install the primary shoe return spring before the secondary to prevent spring anchor pin damage and possible brake clunk. Before installing the rear drums, always loosen the parking brake adjustment enough to get plenty of in-play at one of the brake operating struts. This will prevent interference and possible brake drag when the rear brakes are adjusted. After the service and parking brakes are adjusted, test drive the car. You can forget anything you've heard about burning in new linings. This old practice only causes trouble. To protect new linings from abuse, the owner should be cautioned against unnecessary, heavy brake usage immediately after a reline. And that brings us to the final cause of premature brake lining wear: pedal riding. Here, instead of tools, you'll need the power of persuasion to correct the condition. But with a little appeal to their pocketbook sense, most customers agree to change their driving habits.
Well, Mike, you now have a lot of answers to brake problems, and plenty to think about when you do your next brake job. We zeroed in on brake chatter and lining wear as the main line for this meeting, but we covered all the bases on the way. The points we covered in this film should help any master technician do brake work easier and better. Don't forget to read the reference book for this session, and always check your service manuals and bulletins for the last word. So long till the next meeting.